Hello and welcome back to CMX Power Players. These are the people that are driving our industry. And I'm so excited today to have my friend Jennifer Makris come and join us. Jen, known as the Cannabis Cash Queen. Welcome, Jen.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to finally be in your
I know.
company in this official capacity, this type of platform. So thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We finally got it together.
Now's our time.
Exactly. So, and I'll just read this short little intro. Jen is known as the Cannabis Cash Queen, a trusted advisor and industry leader with more than 20 years of experience in sales, logistics, and secure cash management. She specializes in helping cannabis operators and ancillary partners navigate the operational realities of highly regulated, cash-intensive businesses while building scalable financial systems that support growth. What we're all about, right?
There you go.
In addition to advising operators, Jennifer serves as a strategic advisor for Verdant Strategies and president of CLAB, the Cannabis Law, Accounting and Business Association, and the Florida regional leader of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. She also works closely with advocacy organizations advancing responsible cannabis policy. And through her work, she continues to help bridge the gap between operators, financial institutions, and service providers in supporting the next phase of the cannabis industry's evolution. And man, how many phases have we been through? And yes, I'm sure we're going through the next one because there are new phases all the time, right?
Always changing, ever evolving, right?
Ever evolving, yeah. And 2025 seemed like a pivotal year, and now 2026 is another pivotal year.
Yeah.
Great. So, maybe just take us back. How did you get involved in cannabis to begin with? What brought you into the industry?
I love sharing the story because it is part of my origin story, and I've always been in the field or the realm of logistics and transportation. So keep that in mind as we continue our conversation. When we legalized in Florida, I live in Florida, and so when the Florida market came online, we voted on it in 2016. We probably went operational and started opening our first operator doors in about 2018. And at the time, I had the profound privilege of manning financial institutions, both state banks and credit unions that were ready to bank cannabis. And again, in 2016, 2018, that was like the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket, right? You didn't have the availability that we do today when it came to banking cannabis operators. And so the financial institutions that I was managing, they were ready to move and bank cannabis cash. And at the time, the operators, the Brinks and the Loomises of the world, those armored transportation providers, would not move cannabis cash. And Mike, similar to you, no is not an answer for my customer. So I went out and I vetted these regional transportation providers for the secure and insured movement of cash from point A to point B, but also the on-site handling of cash, right? Next to the people and the product, the cash is the most expensive and riskiest thing in your business, regardless of the industry, right? And so I really realized in that moment that I had something really special and really niche that not a lot of people spoke to. And so taking those three buckets, right, the cannabis the financial institutions, the physical movement of cash, right, the armored transportation providers, and then the on-site automation and equipment that helped reduce the risk and the cost of managing cash on site. I took those buckets and I went to market, right? I launched my own consulting firm that really spoke to, again, the physical movement and security of cash. And fast forward a couple years, let's talk about how the Cannabis Cash Queen came to be. I was on a podcast and this lawyer from Southern Georgia said, "Girl, you're just like a Cannabis Cash Queen." And Mike, in that moment, I was like, holy macaroni, you are completely correct. The Cannabis Cash Queen, everything I just shared with you and your listeners, you'll forget. But the Cannabis Cash Queen, that resonates, right? You're like, oh, So that's how the Cannabis Cash Queen was born. But that's how I also got my start in the cannabis cash space, is when we legalized here in Florida. And then obviously with that, it grew, right? I followed the breadcrumbs, word of mouth referrals. The East Coast has kept me very busy in terms of opportunities with newer markets coming online. So Everyone has touch points in the cash process on site, and I get to educate and speak to those inflection points and those weak points in an operation.
And I know it's certainly in the beginning of the industry, you had dispensary owners driving around with their trunk of their car full of cash, and they were, stashing heaps of cash in their basement and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Does that still go on in some states, or is it
I was
more?
just gonna say, I'm sure that still happens. And cash has been around for decades, for centuries, for that matter, and
Right.
and there's still that control thing around cash, right? Cash is queen in my world, but cash will forever be king. But for the convenience factor to offer a digital transaction component for consumers is really important. So I tell people a couple things.
Really?
One,
Yeah.
what I referenced a moment ago, next to the people and the product, the cash is the most expensive and riskiest thing on site. The other thing I say is, to your point, Mr. Operator, Mr. Owner, your life and your manager's life is really important to me. So please, please, please do not put thousands of dollars of cash in the trunk of your vehicle every day at 2 p.m. and drive it to the bank, because those bad guys are watching, right? They're casing you. They're gonna, they're always a step ahead. And so we talk to reducing that risk and having to take that risk on yourself by transporting the cash in the vehicle, which it's still done today, as well as putting it under the mattress. But there are more opportunities now. And so I get to educate people on other, options that are more secure and insured, to where if there was a loss, if there was a theft, there is some coverage that protects you, protects your employee. Because oftentimes, if a manager is putting that cash in their vehicle and God forbid something happens, an accident, a theft, etc., that cash is not insured or covered. So there's, not only the potential of loss of life, but loss of potential assets in that cash. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is, being able to implement different sorts of technology. So, people that may come from traditional retail may not work with the abundant amount of cash that we deal with today. And so traditional solutions in traditional retail environments may not be as applicable in the cannabis space. But again, educating those operators on what does make sense, what makes sense from what fits now, what can we have for growth. But we're still transacting with a lot of cash. And I'm sure we'll get to this in a moment, Mike, but with rescheduling that has been announced, that does open up safer ways to transact, meaning digital transactions, debit cards without, running on the rails of the gray or illegal side of things. And we could talk about that, what that means exactly. But, now we're going to have more viable options for payment outside of just cash.
Okay, that's good to hear. So Schedule 3 does help to alleviate the, and the problem of, the reluctance of Visa and MasterCard to participate, because we know that whole payment processing space has been really chaotic as well, right? And that's really why we're talking about these businesses having so much cash, right? Because even when they can accept the card, it's a debit card a lot of times, right?
It is a debit card. Right now, there are payment providers, merchant services, and payment providers that do have more, secure processes in place. Some more so than others, and so there are some reputable companies to align with that can help provide secure payment solutions that are on the PIN debit card. But it's also something called the cashless ATM, which has been very predominant in the space. Whereas while we have a physical ATM on site, we're able to use the register, the POS, as a cashless ATM, to where you're utilizing that point of sale as your ATM. So you're charged a fee, you're getting change back, but that is the gray area, right? And so oftentimes we hear about these cashless ATM providers going down, right? So, and then there's an operational impact to that, right? There's an operational impact to the cash on hand, both in the tills and at the registers, but also the impact to the ATM ready cash that's actually in the ATMs, and then those getting depleted because of the need to go and source cash from the ATMs that are on site. So I love the position that I'm in, because I get to advise operators on, this is the good, this is the bad, this is what works, and this is the risk you're going to take if you deploy this type of solution. And again, it's all about for the convenience of the consumer, and we want to make sure we have an ample amount of solutions available for the consumer, because at the end of the day, how can we increase the cart size? How can we increase the ticket size? Is that with cash? Is that with a card? So there's all of these data points that lead to providing this information. And then what is the best, option for an operator? And it's not cookie cutter, right? It's not one size fits all. I like going in and really analyzing, where are you geographically? What is your customer base? What is your customer demographic? Are we in a rural, more migrant area that we're dealing with a crap ton more cash? Or are we in more of a metropolitan area, urban area that, the card is the means for that. So it's really evaluating where, who, what, and why, and then putting a plan together that makes sense.
And then is there a challenge? I'm assuming that there would also be challenges around just keeping track of the cash, right? Isn't that the big problem?
Yes. It's so funny. Story about cash, right? Cash again, king. And the lack of traceability is why people transact in cash. And, when I worked for one of those major, armored transportation providers, and I was going to a dispensary, the last thing I wanted to do was give them my debit card or let alone my ID, because I didn't want that coming back to me. I was working for a federally, a company that had federal oversight, right? So there's some fear there, right? We don't want our employers knowing that we're going to the dispensary to get our medicine or our recreational cannabis. And so there was a fear there. And so great question, because of the lack of traceability around cash, people often choose to transact in cash. And I had a family member, restaurant entrepreneurship runs heavy on the Greek side of my family. And so I remember a family member went to go sell their restaurant, and they transacted a lot in cash, right? And this is applicable to any cash intensive industry. So when he would get an order of hamburger buns in, right? Half the hamburger buns were on the books. Half the hamburger buns were off on the books because, they were able to transact in cash. And when you have a forensic accountant come in and really look at this, all of those sins are exposed and uncovered. And so while we think we're skirting the system right now dealing with cash, it always ends up revealing itself. And, you want to do the right thing from the onset, because it's going to cost you later. And that's what I actually tell my customers and the people that I have the opportunity to engage with. So for entrepreneurs and business owners, don't go after the biggest, shiniest, most newest object, right? Because that may not be the best solution. But really look at what systems, SOPs, things that you can have in place that are going to save you money on the front end versus cost you more on the back end. And so when an operator says to me, "Oh, Jen, I should have listened to you 3 years ago." Well, not only is it going to cost you more now, but it has also cost you more in time and loss and exposure and risk than if we just would have taken, a fraction of the advice early on. Again, setting the foundation correctly, setting that up correctly from the onset versus, and that proactive approach rather that reactive approach that is going to cost you more. So to my restaurant example, when they were looking to sell that particular location and the forensic accountants came in and exposed that 50% on, 50% off on the inventory of hamburger buns, not only did that now devalue the cost of the restaurant in the sale, the owner, the one that was selling the restaurant, had to come out of pocket to bring that evaluation back up to where it made sense. So that's just one example of many when we talk about the lack of trackability when it comes to cash. And in today's day, right, that was several years ago, we do have the POS, the POS and the different equipments that do tally up cash. They do report cash. They speak to the POS. They speak to metrics. So there is that level of visibility now that we may not have had before.
Wow. It's
Scary.
So crazy. Yeah, it's really scary.
And not to cut you off, but when you're dealing with cash, right, that temptation is there too, right? That temptation, whether it's the manager, "Oh, I've got an overage in the cash of $50. Well, who's going to know, right? Other than, the surveillance that's monitoring them. But the temptation that is synonymous with cash is real life, right? So having those trustworthy, people that are the dual control, the trustworthy staff, you always need to stay two steps ahead of it. And so that with cash creates risk, it creates temptation, and you never know what people are dealing with, that may make them more susceptible to the theft or nobody's going to notice this $50 is gone because I was over in my till, right? So cash really does present its own unique set of challenges and risks and temptations.
And is that part of what you do then, is help them to implement the systems. You mentioned SOPs, so that's all part of that. It's going,
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah, we want to reduce the physical touch points in the cash handling process when you're on site. So I affectionately refer to it as the Cannabis Cash ecosystem, right? And it does source usually with the financial institution. And back in 2016, the FI, the financial institution, was really hard to come by. So we were starting with that point. Now that banking component is a little bit more readily available, like I mentioned, some customers already have their banking relationships established by the time they get to me, which is great, which is fine. And now we can talk about the other touch points in that Cannabis Cash ecosystem, which is the physical transit of the cash. And then once it's on site, how do we reduce the physical touch points, right? So we want to reduce the amount of human touch when it comes to handling the cash on site. And you have to think like, what are those physical touch points? It's the point that the cash is received in, whether it's from the bank, from the cash and transit provider, from the employee, to the time it's counted down till it's prepped for the tills. Right now we're already at 3 touch points. The time we're prepping the tills for the shifts or the end of shift, deposit preparation, petty cash, change orders. So there's so many touch points. So how can we automate that? When I come in, I can evaluate, does it make sense to deploy a really sophisticated piece of hardware, which would be on the, let's talk about like the Cadillac of that. That would be what's called the teller cash recycler, really relevant in the banking space or any cash intensive environment such as gaming, right? Casinos use a crap ton of teller cash recyclers. If you go to Planet 13 in the Disney World Planet 13, which is in Las Vegas, right? They've got, I think, 30 or 20 plus POS lanes where customers can go and transact. And I want to say Planet 13, and correct me if I'm wrong, Planet 13, my friends there, I want to say they have well over 5 teller cash recyclers devices deployed in the back to help automate that cash touching process. And I say the Cadillac because a teller cash recycler is not a cheap piece of equipment, or it comes at a higher price tag than what a traditional safe would be, or what we call the smart safe, right? So we have tiers, right? We can do the Daewoo, which would be, if anybody remembers the Daewoo, right? Which is just tabletop counters, right? That's your first point of defense, right? Is that teller cash recycler to help automate or make more efficient that cash counting process, use it to validate what may be a physical breakdown or cash countdown of a drawer, to a regular dump safe or a drop safe where we're putting petty cash in, or change orders or coin, anything that can be insured for overnight secure storage of cash. And then we've got something like a smart safe, right? I love a smart safe. It's kind of like a Chevy, right? It's going to serve both the depository function, but also the counting down of cash. And I always entice my customers or implore my customers to, let's put your larger denominations in what would be a smart safe, because the really cool thing about a smart safe, Mike, is I'm going to put that cash in my device tonight at 10 o'clock, right? My deposit. But by 2 a.m, I've got that cash deposited in my bank account. While it's physically still on site at my dispensary, I have what's called a provisional credit for that deposit in my account the next day. That really helps business owners have more fluctuation with the use of cash, right? The liquidity of cash, the cash accessibility to pay vendors, to pay payroll, to pay utilities, right? So now you are in a better cash position because you've deployed a technology such as a smart safe. Now, a couple caveats, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, pun intended, but with a smart safe, there's a couple components that you need to make sure, your financial institution can offer that service, and
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, and your cash and transit company has the ability to align with your financial institution because it is a sole chain of custody, meaning there's only one person that can have access to the cassettes inside which hold the cash, and that's typically your CIT, your cash and transit provider, which more and more people have the ability to work with that cash and transit provider, the safe company, and the bank. So those 3 components are what's going to be necessary when you look to deploy a smart safe. But that covers all the bases, right? And it reduces the risk, and now you have access to that cash with it still being on site. So I love being able to speak to these different solutions that people may not know about, or they do know about, they just don't know where to start. And here's the final thing I'll say about this, Mike, is there are so many options that it takes time. So while you should be concentrating on your location, your product, your training, all the other things, let someone such as myself, Cannabis Cash Consultants or the Cannabis Cash Queen, really look to what solutions make the most sense for your operation and allow you to deploy your energies elsewhere in your operation, and let me do the legwork and make sense of what makes the most sense for your operation. And you might have multiple locations, right? So your location in I don't know, rural New York may not make the most sense of your location in the financial district of the city, right? So we want to look at what makes the most sense. And I have some formulations that, hey, this you'll get this ROI in under 12 months, or you'll receive an ROI for a teller cash recycler that is maybe north of $60,000 to $70,000, and that may take 18 months to get your ROI, right? But the ROI is really received in reducing the amount of risk and theft, but also the physical labor, the manpower, or your labor that is reduced because of the time it's taken. We're reducing the time that's spent on counting down the drawers, deposit prep, till prep, all of those things that take time, or take 2 employees away from that when they could be stocking shelves or entering stuff for metric, or other mechanisms around the operation that I'm help to save time.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. There's
It's a lot, right? It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And I'm assuming when you talk about the smart safe scenario and tying into banks, those are still cannabis banks, right? They are not FDIC banks yet, right?
Great question. So they are cannabis-friendly banks. Some are FDI insured.
Okay.
I believe like Valley National Bank is FDIC insured. Now, while they have been, a traditional bank offering traditional banking service not only to consumers but to commercial entities, they've been banking cannabis. They were one of the first in Florida to start banking cannabis, actually. And so I should probably go on their website real quick, but I'm pretty sure they're FDIC insured. But that may not be for the cannabis component, to your point, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we have to look at that.
Yeah, that's always a consideration, and it probably varies from state to state too.
100%. You are correct.
And
And are you dealing with a credit union, or are you dealing with an actual traditional bank, right? There's their difference.
of course, yeah. Now, I'm just, I'm hearing you talk mainly about dispensaries. Do you also work with other types of businesses?
I
Cash flow is important for everyone, right?
Cash flow is important to everyone. And I love that you asked me that question. And the answer is yes. While cannabis has taken me on this wild journey, and it's what really opened the door to be able to consult in this space, I actually grew up in the transportation and logistics realm. And inside of that transportation, my parents were heavily involved in the casino and gaming industry. So it's interesting that I've always been closely aligned to high risk, highly regulated, cash intensive businesses. And so I like the restaurant industry, right? My husband's Greek, it's in his DNA. Same with me, right? This highly regulated, cash intensive industry, it's kind of like in my DNA. And so I do serve other cash intensive, highly regulated spaces, such as I mentioned a moment ago, gaming, adult entertainment establishments, your local convenience store chains, your liquor stores. And while I say cash intensive, it's interesting, the businesses that say no longer accept cash, right? Our stadiums, our sports stadiums have been notorious for now being a cashless environment. And that's a whole other conversation that we can have another day. So it kind of breaks my heart a little bit when I see these signs like no longer taking cash. And I feel like that's against my constitutional right? However, and again, another conversation for another day. But to your question, yes, we speak to and serve other retail. So we're retail agnostic, right? All of the solutions we provide are applicable for any sort of retail environment. And we want to make sure it makes sense. So I mentioned that I have these formulations that, does this make sense? Do you transact in X amount of cash on a weekly basis to where my services would make sense? Whether it's on the consulting side or deployment of these pieces of technology or hardware, they come at a cost. And so if you do X amount of cash on a weekly basis, then this makes the most sense. If not, then, I'm happy to help in any other way, but we need to make sure this is beneficial and it makes sense. So yes, any sort of retail operations are potential prospects to have a conversation.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I think this obviously is a vast and fairly technical category that you're helping people with. So I'm sure we could talk another hour or more if we got into it. Um, I guess switching gears a little bit, maybe you could just talk a little bit about how has the industry changed over since you've been in, and then how do you see the future? Rescheduling is obviously the big thing. We've also got the hemp ban going on. Maybe give us a little bit of your overall view of where we've been and where are we going.
Let me get my crystal ball real quick. Just kidding.
Yes,
Or my
please.
magic 8 ball, right? So what I have seen thus far, right, is the availability of financial services being more available for our industry, right? 10 years ago, banking opportunities were not as widely offered or available for cannabis operators. So I have seen the evolution of that, which is exciting, right? To be able to offer safe banking solutions, not to be confused with Safe Banking Act that we were trying to get passed in Washington, right? But you have to think the ability to provide banking just provides security and a safe environment for these operators. To your point earlier, so many years ago, the wild, wild west of Colorado and California and Washington State, the exorbitant amount of cash that was in circulation, and then what do you do with this cash, right? And not being able to take it to a financial institution for a safe deposit. So the availability of banking being so much more available for operators has been wonderful to see. I will also say that the collaboration across the industry, so many people in the earlier days were keeping these things so close to the chest. There is a seat for every butt, and there is information to share that will only provide for safe practices across our industry. We are in such a profoundly unique position to have this blank canvas in front of us that we get to create. Our thumbprint is on this. Our DNA is a part of this. We are part of this prohibition, and I really take that so seriously and such a we are writing it now, and so we are part of this, and we are going to be part of the proverbial history books when it comes to the legalization of cannabis. And I take that role on very seriously. And how can we design this to where it is scalable, where it is safe practice, where we're providing education? And as I've seen the evolution in the last 10 years that I've been involved, is that people are willing to play in the sandbox together more and more. We're collaborating more and more. We're learning from each other more and more. We are being a little bit more inclusive, whether that's from a Black, brown, Asian, a female, male. Like we're all coming together, and we're advocating for the same thing, whether it's on Capitol Hill with our local jurisdictions. I will say, as I kind of squirrel for a moment, to speak to this component, because 10 years ago, I was not involved in the legalization of cannabis. I wasn't working at the Capitol in Tallahassee around the legalization of cannabis. It wasn't until 3 years ago that I was like, holy macaroni. The work that I get to do today is done at the government level. It is working with lawmakers. It's working with lobbyists. It's working with my senator and my House and people that are putting these into law and bills that are being written. And so it is the work that is done there that I have found myself really getting entrenched in, and knowing the people that are at Capitol Hill or at your state capitol making these decisions. And it's helping break down those negative bias that we carried with us all of our life, right? The Nancy Reagan era, the dare to not do drugs. We're breaking down these biases, and it's so having these conversations with these folks that have been ingrained to think one way, and we are business professionals, Mike. We're business professionals. We are constituents in these lawmakers' districts. And I was just in Tallahassee this year. It's funny. It's not funny, actually. It's ironic that the senator in my district, he is anti-cannabis, and he's also the chair of the tourism committee. And so we did not pass recreational cannabis in Florida. We did not pass on it last time we voted on it. We had 56%. We needed 60% supermajority. Clearly the people want it, right? But also we did not get enough petitions this year to have it on the ballot. I share all this with you and our listeners because Florida is a heavily heavy tourism industry, right? So how much money are we leaving on the table from a tourism perspective? Now that we have the medical, the rescheduling, now people can travel. We just saw this week that the TSA is going to be allowing medical cannabis patients to travel with their medical cannabis across state lines. And here in Florida, listen, I'm a parent. If I'm traveling to Disney, I've got some anxiety about it, right? Disney is a lot. If I'm traveling from out of state, I may want my medicine because I may not choose to consume, whether it's Xanax or alcohol or whatever people use to medicate. If I'm crossing state lines to come to Disney or go on a cruise or what have you, I can't legally bring my medicine. And so now with rescheduling, now with the TSA allowing cannabis patients to travel with their cannabis, this opens up so many opportunities. And I share all this because in Florida, as a heavily driven tourism economy, Mr. Congressman, Mr. Senator, let's lean into the tourism component and let's lean into how many more dollars can we bring into our state from a tourism perspective by supporting the cannabis industry. And so while he was anti-cannabis and voting for any cannabis policy or bills that were presented, leaning into that and coming from a tourism background, raised in a tourism company, tour transportation and logistics and travel agency, which is still in business to this day, leaning into that as opposed to, hi, I'm a canna mom, which is nothing wrong with that, but hey, instead of leaning into the cannabis side, leading with the tourism, really help break down those barriers and change his perception. And now we're having more educated conversation around how they go hand in hand, and how we can be of service versus how it could be negatively received. And so I share that because I'd love for people to get involved, whether it is in Washington, D.C., or in your state legislature. Get involved because that is where the magic happens. Those are where the decisions are made. And, I wasn't doing that 10 years ago when I got involved. So that is one of the things that I am so prideful about now. And being exposed to that is just a different conversation with a different category of people, which has been really great. And now we're moving the needle both locally and with operators locally, but now on the government side and the legislative side has been huge. So to recap, availability of banking, the availability of collaboration, the opportunity to get involved at the legislative level has been profound. And just the really being more inclusive and learning from each other has been really where I have seen us evolving as an industry over the last 10 years. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I got way more than I expected. So excellent. That's great. Well, Jennifer Makris, the Cash Queen, thank you so much for joining us on Power Players. Very illuminating, and look forward to having you back again, and for chapter 2 when we get there.
Look forward to it. Thank you again, Mike. And you're a power player in this space. I'm working my way to get there, and just if we can help, business owners and operators and entrepreneurs really, put in the fundamental and foundational pieces for success, that's what these conversations are all about. So I appreciate the opportunity and the platform. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming. We'll see you soon.
Look forward to it.